Okay, button's green now, great. Okay, let's start again. Hi everyone, my name's Rachel. I'm a data scientist at a company called Solar Analytics, where we get a lot of solar energy data and energy usage data and help people make better use of their solar. I'm not going to talk too much about solar today. Feel free to ask me any questions about solar later if you like. What I'm going to more focus on is smart meters and energy meters, and what can you tell with actually not much work at all from your energy meter. I'll be looking at a few other data sources too, what can be taken from there, and touching on the consumer data rights that's coming for energy soon. First, I want to do a bit of a who's who in the Australian energy market, because there's just a lot of acronyms starting with AE in this space. Of course. Basically the only one that doesn't. National energy market. This is the energy grid in Australia, basically. We ignore Western Australia because that's a little bit too far away, and Northern Territory. So Western Australia has its own grid around Perth, and that goes down to the south and a bit further up. I'm not quite sure the distance. Northern Territory just has a whole lot of small microgrids, and same with South Australia, like rural South Australia and Queensland. But most of Queensland is on the NEM, National Energy Market, as is New South Wales, ACT, Victoria, Tas, and yes, most of South Australia. So these states are all connected. If there's a fault up in Queensland that causes, say, a frequency problem on the grid, the South Australia big battery can kick in and solve that problem. That happens quite a bit. Actually, the battery solving problems like that. Australian Energy Market Commission, or the AEMC. So these are the ones who make rules on how the NEM should work, how energy is bought on the market, what type of metering should be installed, and just sort of make sure things should work if people follow the rules. It's an independent body. I think all of these bodies are actually. The Australian Energy Regulator. They regulate electricity networks and gas pipelines too, in all jurisdictions except Western Australia. And they set the amount of revenue that network businesses can recover from customers using these networks. And then the really big one, AEMO, or the Australian Energy Market Operators. They're the ones who actually make sure everything works. They operate the pricing on the market. They do investigations like, okay, we had this weird fault on the grid. Let's investigate, see what's happening. They do forecasting to make sure the energy needs are going to be met in the next half hour to months or years ahead. You have your distributed network providers, or DNSPs. So these are the people who own the poles and wires, or like are in charge of the poles and wires in various areas. So in Queensland, we have Ergon Energy and Energex. So we, in Broadbeach, is an Energex zone, because I've walked past lots of substations, they say Energex. And then various places. So in Sydney, it's mostly Ausgrid or Endeavour. Canberra has Evo Energy that's recently split from Actu AGL. Victoria has a whole heap sort of in the bottom left-hand corner. And then South Australia Power Networks as well. And energy retailers. These are the people who send you energy bills. Lots of choice, lots of people, changes. Like, yeah, depends where you live is who you have access to. Okay, energy meters. What are the different types of energy meters we have? So we have the first old school accumulation meters. These are what most people probably still have in Australia. So on the left, sorry, I have to keep on making sure I'm saying the right, left, or right. On your left, you have just a normal dial, it ticks over. On the right, you have the exciting circle one where you have different units and you have lots of different dials and you have to do lots of adding to work out what you have. These are not smart whatsoever. Like, you need someone to come to your meter board and say, yes, this is how much you're using. The energy companies need to attempt to read your meter every 3 months or so. But if the meter is like behind locked doors and things like that, often they're like, we think you use this much. And so on your energy bills, you have estimate, and it could be completely wrong. They could be completely overcharging you. You can have things like controlled loads as well. So controlled loads are often things like hot water or heating, where they charge you under a different rate. So you could have multiple of these meters measuring different things in your home. If you have solar on your house and you have this type of meter, so you shouldn't have that in Australia, they don't like you doing this, the meter will actually run backwards when you're feeding energy back into the grid. They don't like that because they charge solar feed-in at a different rate than what you buy back. So solar you generally sell for about 12 cents per kilowatt, where you buy energy from the grid for somewhere between 20 and 30 cents. So they don't like your energy meter running backwards. Interval meters. So this is kind of the halfway point between the accumulator ones and the smart meters. These don't display a rolling disk. They don't just accumulate. They go, in this 30-minute block, you've used this amount of energy. So when the DNSPs or whoever is coming to read your meter comes to read it, they have a little optical device that they can sort of wave near it, and it downloads data saying, in the last whatever period, 3-month period, this is how much energy you've used in various 30-minute blocks. So this way they can charge for peak and off-peak power. So with the old meters, they couldn't. It was just all flat rate. So these would be pretty common in Australia too. And then smart meters. They're not really smart. The only smart thing about them is that people don't need to come and read them. They have connectivity, so they send the data to whoever actually is in control of it. So it depends a lot on what network area you live in, who gets that data. I'll talk more about that in a minute. They don't control anything, they just send data out. And even now, there's quite a lot of opposition to smart meters. It seems to be mostly along the, we can't have wireless connectivity because health reasons. So as of July last year, you can actually request your smart meter connectivity to be turned off, so someone still has to come to your house and read it. I wouldn't recommend it. So any new meter that gets installed in Australia, or at least on the NILM, has to be a smart meter now. As of 1st of December 2017. So in Australia, smart meter penetration is sitting at around 30%, as opposed to New Zealand, which is about 70%. Worldwide is a bit of a mix. So North America is around 30 to 40%. There's places in Europe, such as Italy and Sweden, that have penetration around 80%. So the main thing that's happened, there's high penetration in some places, is that governments, forget how bright this slide is, governments will say, no, we want smart meters rolled out everywhere. And this is what Victoria did, starting in around 2006. It wasn't a great rollout. There's lots of reasons why. It's because different people had to do different things. There was sort of, it made it look like you actually had to pay for your own smart meter, and the technology they originally used too was just not that great. They have smart meters there that are officially smart meters, but they don't even have any connectivity. Okay, so we have all of this energy data, but who actually collects it? And this is one of the great questions. Like, it depends where you live very, very much. So for example, if you're in Sydney and you're in the Ausgrid area, Ausgrid says we don't deal with smart meters. We are the ones that go and read all your other meters, but smart meters you have to talk to your retailer about. So they don't have access to any of the smart meter data. Your energy retailer does. But if you're in, say, the Ergon area, which is most of Queensland, Ergon will go out and install your smart meters for you. And I think it's quite hard to find these details that they would then have access to your smart meter data. Yeah, okay. One important thing to know, though, is that you actually have access to this smart meter data. There's an Australian energy rule that says that if you contact your energy retailer or DNSP, depending on something, once again, depends on who has it, they have to give you your at least 2 years' worth of energy data. So typically, I believe this is Endeavour Energy, which handles Western Sydney. They'll ask you for your NMI, which should be on your meter, on your energy bill, which is your national metering identifier. Give it a bit of basic detail so they know who you are, and then they'll generally email you within a day or so with your smart meter or your energy data. So you can do it for any type of meter. Doesn't mean they'll do it in a particularly nice format, but it's going to come. That's right. And also substation data. So there is another energy rule that says DNSPs have to make some substation data available. So if you look up EVO, so that's the ACT1 substation data, you'll generally find a web page that has listed just a whole lot of CSVs nicely enough of different substation data. So that's just aggregate data for about 30 minutes for all the places that are provided energy from that substation. Also, just going to touch on third parties that might have your energy data. So there's sort of in the top right, there's like Sense and Philips, sort of the smart homes type things. And then you also have a lot of like the solar energy companies will also collect energy data, mostly your solar production, but it's getting more common to do your consumption data as well. And then there's people like Sonnen and Tesla, which have their batteries, which will be collecting data as well. Okay, and who has all of these people's data? So Australia doesn't have anything like the GDPR, so the General Data Protection Rights that Europe has, or the more recent Californian ones. All of these places were like, we abide by the Australian privacy principles. But as far as I can see, there's nothing that's actually saying, is your energy data personally identifiable information? I believe that there are some rules about selling energy data for the retailers and DNSPs, but not necessarily these third parties. Right, so let's go in. What can you actually tell from smart meter data? So case study 0, actually non-smart meter data. So this is actually my energy data. I don't have a smart meter, but I contacted Ausgrid. I was like, Ausgrid, please give me my data for the last 2 years. So they sent back a PDF of the energy readings for the last 2 years, so 8 data points, which looks like that. So all they tell me is my general supply, because I have a flat rate, I don't have controlled loads, I don't have solar panels. The ADL is the average daily load, so the general supply divided by how many days are in that period. But they do give me some graphs. Beautiful. And this was actually kind of useful, because I was like, oh, I knew my energy bills have been high for the last 2 periods, but oh wow, that is actually a bit high. I think it's because we got new heater lamps installed in the bathroom, because before we had just like 1 that was not really working, and now we have 4. And we now have to get used to using the light as a light, not the heater as a light, because I think that's what's causing the problem. Otherwise, it's my hot water that's dying, because what else could it be? Okay, actual case study. So this is 15-minute interval data. So smart meters, it's often 15 or 30-minute data, though the hardware can often do down to 1 minute. I think DNSPs would love to collect the 1-minute data, but it's just more expensive to send more data. Okay, so this is what the daily household consumption looks like over the 1.5 years of data. They will give you 2 years of data when you request, but this house got a smart meter installed in July 2018, so we don't have data before then. And so what can we tell from just this data? Okay, so if you look closely, in July, so at the very beginning of the graph and sort of halfway around, you do see there's a spike of this, the average load is higher. So that's saying there's probably some heating. It's July. This house is in the Blue Mountains in Sydney, so it does get cold there. Actually, I should say for all these examples, I do know the people and I have asked permission to use their energy data. And been giving them updates about what I find out about them. So looking at winter, it's like, okay, they probably have a heater and it's electric, it's not gas. There's also a bit of a spike in January 2019. Unfortunately, we only have one January on this graph, so it's probably also cooling. In Australia, since it's Australia's probably then a reverse cycle air conditioner that they're using. But other than that, there's not too much we can tell from just the straight up daily household consumption. So let's look a bit more. We got data in a 15-minute resolution, so what does it look like throughout the day? So this is just the average day. And you can see that there's this more hump around 4 a.m., which could be they sometimes get up at 4 a.m., but that, maybe. We'll look into that in a bit. But there's definitely a start, the energy usage starts around 6 a.m. So it looks like this house, people start getting up using energy at about 6 a.m. We can see it increases, there's a little bit of a dip around 9 or so maybe they are leaving the house around 9 o'clock or just before, so work or school drop-off is happening. But there is quite a lot of usage during the day. So it could be still a weekend. It could be there's people at home during the week as well. And then we can see there is a sort of jump up again around 6 o'clock. So people are coming home, they're cooking dinner, they're watching TV, having the heating or cooling on. And then sort of go to bed around 10:30, but it's not always. So what I want you to look at, this little bump at the beginning, I was trying to work out what was happening there. It's like, well, maybe it's a weekend difference. So looking at the difference between weekday and weekend, there's still that little bump on both days, so it's nothing to do with that. But you can see people get up later on the weekends. It's a bit more variable when they get up. It's not like, oh, we have to get to school or get to work today. But other than that, like there are differences, but it's not too much, to be honest. So it looks like their routine, there are people around. What I did next, though, was break it up by season. So that lump at 4 a.m. is winter. It's cold in the mornings in the mountains. So they have the heater on starting at 4 a.m. programmed so they can actually face getting out of bed in the morning. And you can also see in the evenings the energy usage is much higher because it's winter, you're home, it's cold and dark. But then also in summer, the energy usage is high during the day because that's when it's hot. It's also hot out in the Blue Mountains. So they're using the aircon much more during the day there. And then spring and autumn are both fairly flat because it's actually nice weather at that time. And just to look at some individual days, I just pulled out a week in September, no particular reason why I chose this. And sorry, I'm waving my mouse on the screen and that's not going to help you, is it? Is the Monday, Tuesday are the spikes at the beginning of the day. I actually went and checked the bomb weather data for those days and so, oh yeah, it was cold those mornings. That's definitely the heater going on. And then you can start seeing in sort of the details. So the green line I have, which is Tuesday, you can see the energy usage is actually pretty low during the day. Someone was out during the day. There was some stuff going on. Maybe they had the washing turned on when they were headed out. But it's pretty low usage. And you can start sort of seeing what people have in each day. I'm just going. So yeah, also one thing you can definitely see is that at 9, like the 9 a.m. drop-off, like people are leaving just before 9 a.m. So really does seem like work or local schools. And you can really see too when people are away with this data. So this is April this year, late April this year. They were, no, not this year, last year, 2020. They were away around the Anzac Day long weekend. And if you remember last year, you could take like 2 days off and get 10 days off work or something like that. And they took advantage of that. They were gone for that period. And that was just really easy to tell. Just sum all the values, do a sort and go, yep, gone on those days. But one thing I'll say for this site actually has solar installed, this house. And how smart meters are generally wired up, they don't care what energy, or when you self-consume your own solar energy, because they can't charge you for it. They're only measuring how much energy you're exporting back to the grid, which is the yellow line in this case, and how much energy you're pulling back from the grid, which is the blue line. So there's just very little you can actually tell from this now, because all the energy usage during the day is hidden by the solar. Like you can see some spikes in the solar in the middle of the day, but it's like, is this cloud? Is this someone actually turning on an appliance? Don't know. So solar can help hide what you're actually using. Having said that, smart meters can be wired up differently, so you can see stuff. It's generally not done though. Okay, case study 2. This is a 30-minute resolution one. And one thing we didn't see on the previous example is see this like large chunk of energy that's happening like between midnight and 2 a.m. in the morning. So blocks of energy like that. Does anyone have a guess what this could be?
Hot water.
Yeah, hot water. So hot water, you can program hot water heaters to turn on at certain times to take advantage of off-peak energy, which is in the middle of the night. And that's what this house has. So the previous example, I can say they didn't have electric hot water because we couldn't see any evidence of big spikes. So, but with this one, if we look at the same house a few months later, the hot water is now looking like this. Or there's maybe not the hot water, it is the hot water. These spikes straight after it. And the homeowner had access to this data and he had a look at it. He's an electrician, so he knows what he's looking for. And realised that those spikes that's happening in the middle of the night, that's my hot water leaking. He went to his hot water system, found it was leaking, because when it leaks, it's like, oh, it's not heated up yet, have to keep on heating. So he went, he contacted his landlord saying, you need to fix up my hot water system. And yeah, got it fixed within a week. Whereas for most people, they might get a higher energy bill later and go, oh, that's high. Don't know what to do about that. Don't know what that could be. And final case study, having a look at higher frequency data. So smart meter generally is 15, 30 minutes, but as I said at the beginning, you can often get it down to 1 minute. And in this case, I'm going to just look at some solar production. Okay, so if you're not so familiar with solar production, you would expect the solar curve to sort of follow the general trend, the shape that started off at the beginning and have a nice parabolic arc. So this is pretty flat at the top, so looking at this like, cloudy day. Started off all rightish, but cloud came over. So that's 30-minute resolution. Let's add some 15-minute resolution, and it's giving us some more details. It's a little bit more spiky, still, and it does go straight down to 0 at one time, and so that's pretty bad cloud for it to actually go that low. Let's look at 5-minute resolution. And it's got way more spikes. And you start seeing that, if you imagine sort of that nice parabolic arc, you can see some of these spikes are actually reaching where you would expect it to be. So implying is, like, if it is cloud, it's pretty intermittent if it's occasionally reaching actual expected production. And this is what 1 minute looks like. So I'm going to, too many lines on this graph, so let's go to this one, still 1 minute. And this looks ridiculous. Okay, mic problems. This looks kind of ridiculous. It's spiking so much. Like, what is happening with this cloud? Like, is it blowing over so quickly that it's spiking up and down? And what is actually happening in this case is the inverter is shutting off. So with your solar inverter is what turns the solar power from DC to AC. It talks to the grid, and it turns off if it thinks it's not safe to produce power. And it's turning off a lot because it's detecting high voltage on the network. So along the NILM, the voltage should be 230 volts plus or minus some percentages. And generally, if your voltage gets above 250, there's different standards out there, your inverter shuts off. And that's what it's doing here. And this is the sort of data that your DNSP loves to have, because they don't know what's happening beyond the substations a lot of the time. And voltage problems are something where they can go to your nearest transformer and tap it up or down, depending on what needs to happen. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of what we can tell from smart meter data. We can tell what heating and cooling you have on your house. We can tell if you have electric hot water. We can tell what other major appliances you have. We can make pretty good guesses at your daily routine. When you come home, if you have children, that sort of stuff. And this is one data point. I didn't do anything more complicated than some averages, some segmenting and averages. If we start getting more data points, like if we have the energy for 1,000 houses in an area, we can start combining it with, say, the Bureau of Statistics demographic information and making good guesses of, well, how many people are in this household. And also, as mentioned, like, you tie it up with Bunder, the Bureau of Meteorology data, and have a look at the weather and what's happening. And then, of course, there's a whole lot of different machine learning techniques you can start applying to get better details. Let's have a look at what some of the third parties do at the moment. So solar and batteries. So this is where most people would have third-party monitoring in their houses now. When you have if you get a solar installed in your house, your inverter nowadays, at the very least, will track your solar production. So from your solar production, it's not a huge amount you can tell from. You can tell what orientation your panels are roughly. You can tell if there's problems on the grid with the voltage or whatever else could be happening. But it's becoming more common now for them to include consumption monitoring as well, and especially with batteries, they will monitor those sort of details. I have companies like the one I work for, Solar Analytics. We do monitor, this is what our dashboard looks like, and this is one of our staff members who just has a lot of things monitored. And we monitor individual circuits in your house. So in this particular case, we got the total production, total consumption, hot water, solar hot water, lighting, power points, batteries, EV charger, so electric vehicle charger, oven and cooktop, and fridge and freezer. Like, extreme case in that, but there are companies that will measure this sort of stuff. So there's other companies such as Sense. So Sense, what they do, and if you went to Tish's energy talk at the mini-conf yesterday, the hardware mini-conf, he actually has some stuff on the Sense in the hardware that they use, and lots of different energy monitoring hardware. So Sense measures your energy usage at a ridiculously high frequency, like in milliseconds. They'll measure it. And then this lets you build a really detailed profile on what they use. These people who started Sense, they come from a speech recognition background, and they're like, well, energy waves, are like speech waves. And what I have pictured here, which I grabbed from their website, is they say this is what an incandescent light bulb looks like when it turns on. You have the massive spike at the beginning when you switch and when it's like energy is flooding and it's turning on, and then it sort of stabilizes like that. And what they do is called, I have to remember, non-intrusive load monitoring, where they get the entire household load and then disaggregate it, break up the different appliances. So they claim to be able, with a few weeks of training, to be able to like identify different appliances you have in your house, like down to the model of kettle you have. There was a company in 2012 is where I could find news articles about it, where they had 2-second energy data at 2-second frequency, and they claimed they could tell what TV show you were watching based on your energy usage. And I'm a little bit skeptical about doing this in real world, especially at 2-second resolution, real world, because you kind of do need to know TV models and things like that, which I suppose Sense could help you with. But there's just so much different TV you could be watching. So in a lab setting where you have limited TV shows and know the model and things like that, sure, it's possible, but maybe not in reality. And what I mentioned, so these last two are examples of non-intrusive load monitoring. So it's getting your total energy, disaggregating, working out different appliances. This is something DNSPs are really interested in because they want to know if you have an air conditioner at your house. So then they can better design the grids. Like, well, there's lots of people with air cons here. In the summer, we have to really make sure this area is actually looked after. Alternatively, your energy retailer's like, well, the energy prices are really expensive today because everyone's turned on the aircon. Can we ask our customers to turn it off? And we know which customers to actually target, so we don't need to pay so much for the wholesale price of energy. There was an energy company, I'm blanking on their name now, who did that at one of the heat waves in Melbourne a few years ago, where they messaged all their customers saying, if you turn off your, if you reduce the amount of energy you're using, we're going to give you a $50 voucher. And it worked. A lot of people turned off the energy. It worked so well, they were like, we're going to give you $100. And the other big thing in sort of third-party energy management is what's called home energy management systems, or HEMS. So this is like smart home stuff. Like think the Philips light bulbs, where you can program your lights to turn on at certain times, or your air conditioning to turn on before you get home, so it's nice and warm or cold when you get home. This is another thing that energy retailers and DNSPs are really interested in, because they're like, well, if we can control your air conditioner, we can manage our things a lot better too. Yeah. There's also talk about batteries, doing the same sort of thing with batteries, and so it's called virtual power plants. Whereas people are like, well, DNSPs are like, well, if we have batteries, we might subsidize the cost for you a bit. But we can control when to charge them and discharge them. Then we can better handle the grid. So I've seen examples in Sydney where there was expected to be a big storm coming through the city later that day. So they were charging all the batteries on the peak time, when you don't normally do that, to prepare just in case the thunderstorm took out some power lines or whatever. And the other thing, if you have third parties then controlling your house, you kind of then have to trust a third party security. It's like, do you trust your energy provider to have enough security that people can't hack into their systems and start controlling your house? Or then the whole grid infrastructure, like if they get in and start discharging the battery, everyone's batteries, that will cause problems to the grid. Okay, bit of change of pace now. Consumer data rights. So this is an Australian federal government initiative that they started in November 2018. And the aim, their stated aim, is to give consumers control over their data. They've started with the open banking work, which is kind of starting to have things implemented now. And the general idea is like, if we give everyone data, they'll be able to make better decisions. So energy is the next one. So with the energy one, it's just gone to, there was a discussion paper last year, and we're still waiting on like the results of that feedback to that discussion paper. Some of the information data sets they were proposing to share is the standing data, so things like your national metering identifier, average daily load, network tariff, so how much you're paying for your energy and the type of meters installed. And as part of this proposal, they're not going to be like, everyone gets access to all of this data. Some of this data will be going to AMO, so in this one, AMO wants to see it. They're saying your retailers should be able to see it. Metering data providers, so the people actually control the smart meter data, and your distributors, the DNSPs. Customer provided data, this is like your address, your phone number, all of that sort of stuff that people need to actually bill you, and only for retailers. But part of this proposal too, I say only for retailers, but so it's your retailer, but it's saying, well, maybe if you say to, like, I want to swap energy companies, new fancy retailer, can you talk to I give you permission to talk to my old retailer to get all this information about me. Give me my energy data so you can better tailor a plan for me or something like that. And like, say, your metering data. So if you have a smart meter, this could be the 15-minute resolution data. If you're like me, you're like, here's 8 data points. And this one is interesting. So, because it is a lot of energy data involved with it. And it does open up the opportunity for third parties to start doing things with data, like getting your data. Actually, that's one thing I've forgotten to mention. When I mentioned right at the beginning that it's not always in nice formats they give you the energy data in. So PDF, I didn't expect to get a PDF, but I did get a PDF. But for the other data I was showing, it came in NEM12 format, which is a type of CSV, kind of. Like, you can open it up in Excel and it looks fine. But there's like an 80-page spec on how it works. I tried to read it, and then I looked it up and found a Python package called NemReader that does it for you. I highly recommend that. Don't try and understand it, because there's things like, when a row starts with this number, this is an example of this data. Anyway. But sharing this data, and for most consumers, NEM12 format is not useful. But it does open the market up to third parties where they can start actually showing end consumers, this is your data, this is what you can actually do. You might want to turn your hot water from heating up in the middle of the day to 2 a.m. in the morning. You have your billing data, so just extra details that are on your bill. Product data, so this is a really interesting one too. If you ever try to, who here has tried to change their energy provider in the last few years? How did you find the information on different tariffs that people offered, like the different rates? Rubbish, yeah. In general, the best, you can go to federal government has Energy Made Easy, where you can put in some rough details and it tells you stuff. But it's not always the truth, because really the best way to get the best energy plan is to say, ring up a new shiny energy provider and say, hi, I'm thinking of changing plans. What can you do for me? And they give you an offer. And it's like, thanks, I'll think about it. Then you ring up your original one and say, well, I've been offered this. What can you do? And repeat until you get bored of it. And as a warning, though, if you do that, have a spreadsheet, because they'll be like, we can give you a 20% discount. And then neglect to tell you that the actual base rate is 60% higher, not 60%, but 40% higher or something like that. So have a spreadsheet where you're actually keeping track of these numbers. But as part of this proposal, they're proposing that all the different products they offer have to be open, have to be available, have to be in a common format. Victoria has something similar to this at the moment. And the last thing they're proposing is a distributed resource register. So this basically means where are their solar panels installed, or any other energy things. Like I do know of some people who have at-home wind turbines, so that as well. This already exists actually, and AMO takes care of it. And when will this happen? This is, as I said, discussion paper. We're waiting on the results of that. If the banking one started in 2017 and they're just getting started doing stuff kind of now, we don't know. And should we be worried about all of this? About the data, my feeling with this is that you can tell a lot from the smart meter data, and you should be cautious about how secure your data being held, what can be done with it. I can see a lot of benefits from the consumer data rights. I can also see just lots of people taking advantage of the situation. And also looking at things like grid stability. I work in energy, I work with AMO a bit, and I was like, oh, there are some problems on the grid, and having this data would make such a huge difference to the stability of the grid. I don't have a good answer. It's what you feel like with your house. Like, how much do you trust other people? Do you care that other people know you have a reverse cycle aircon? And how much you trust. I would be more worried about third parties because there are just less regulations around what they can share. They're not necessarily in Australia, so you don't know what rules they're governed by. And also, they often can collect information about you that you just don't know. Right? They might say, oh, look, we've got a dashboard. You can see things in 15-minute resolution, where in reality, they're collecting that second-level resolution. I think we've got a few more minutes left, maybe. So 1 second. OK, so maybe no questions today, but come up and ask me any questions after, and thank you for being a great audience.